Welcome to the Books and Beer Book Club, coming to you from Cercis Brewing Company in Columbus, Wisconsin. We're a different kind of book club, only reading books by authors who can visit us in person or via Zoom for the discussion. We've been going strong since 2015, meeting nearly every month. We're now making these fun and informative discussions available to you on video. I'm your host, Valerie Beal. I'm an author myself, and I enjoy interviewing our guest authors and facilitating the questions from our readers both in person and on Zoom. We hope you enjoy this replay. To join us live, please check out our schedule on our Facebook page at Books and Beer Columbus.
So for those of you who are friends and family of Jim has been one of our longtime attendees at Books and Beer. Like back when we were Black Kettle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So started showing you parts of the book.
Yeah. So, I mean, for years and years, we've been learning bits and pieces about the writing process. And it's been nice because he's been able to come and then talk to the other authors that are here. Many of the authors we get in are independently published. And so the process is very similar to what you did to get this book into the hands of readers. It's just so fun when we know someone, and we're just so pleased that you were able to get to the point where we now are holding this book and able to read it. So congrats, just a huge round of applause. Yay.
I actually rode on that truck for 6 months. And
6 months on this truck.
that's after you trained for it.
So one of the people that was instrumental in Jim's book becoming a reality is someone also here from Wisconsin, Christine Kalani. She has shepherded many a book along to publication, and she's also an author that's been here as a visitor to Books and Beer. And you wanted to say a few words, Christine?
And I just want the Zoom people to hear.
Yeah.
In my 11 years of doing this book stuff, and that doesn't include my own book stuff, because I think I met Jim before I even started my company. Jim has been working on this book, right? Right, Angela? Yeah. And I have never met such a tenacious guy. I mean, I've had writers approach me, and I'm sure you have too, Val, that they need a bit of help, and you hear from them once, and then that's it. You never hear from them again. Well, that's not Jim. We kept hearing from him. He kept giving me pieces, and I'm like, well, Jim, go talk to and try this, and he just kept at it. And the stuff that he gave me to work on for this kind of finished product was impressive. You did a great job from where you started to where you are. That's great.
Yeah, this is like the third rewrite.
All the authors understand this. We understand this. We really do.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let you all know this guy is for real, and he just did a great job.
Well, with dragons speaking words really helps.
Yeah, it does.
A lot.
It does. Okay, so I'm going to pivot back, and I didn't lose my connection. Yay. Feel free to grab a bar stool from out there if you want to. No problem. We have a full house, you guys. This is awesome. It's just so fun to hold this. And I just love that you have so many photos in this. But for everyone here in the room tonight, of course, there's different framed photos floating around. Please feel free to pass those around and look. There's one in particular where there's Post-it notes where people have, they're identified, and you're going to recognize the names, from inside the book. I just think it's super fun when there's so many photos. Jim was telling me something really interesting, and it was about the cameras that people brought with. And often the men, you said, the other soldiers brought with big 35 millimeter cameras, but you had with you like a pocket camera, right?
The first one was just a little flash camera, Kodak. And then I got a 35 millimeter, but I kept a small one in my pocket.
So were most of these pictures that you have just taken with your small pocket camera?
No, some of them were taken with the Kodak too.
Yeah.
The old ones.
I mean, you just think about how wonderful it is to have that record, that personal record, and then to be able to go through here and see the ones that you decided to include. How did you decide which ones to include and how hard was that?
Chris helped me with that.
Yeah. Did you guys go through all the photos to decide?
I showed her this one picture of the snake that we ate, so you don't want that in there.
Snakes are good to eat with the right foot.
Yeah. The Koreans
It tastes like chicken.
cook a really good snake
Really good snake.
and dogs.
Well, you do what you gotta do.
Not tripod.
No, nobody ate
Tripod
tripod.
got shipped home. They made him into an officer. They made him into a sergeant and shipped him home. I never saw him again.
It's just louder in here than usual. You're all wondering why I'm laughing. You have a good crowd tonight. This is you have a big family. This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool.
I got the American Legion, the VFW.
So
I was expecting more.
I'm going to give away my age here. So I was thinking about what I didn't learn in school in history class as I was reading this book. And then I had to go, of course, to the trusty internet and look some things up because being born in 68. And then, my textbooks fall over high school really didn't have much on Vietnam in them, through, up till high school. And I didn't just have this covered. So I was like, okay, I got to get my head in the game here and really look at where this pass is. And when I was looking this up, it is apparently has been the site of many different battles through the years.
The French were there.
Right. So in 1954, according to Google, correct me if the great Google is wrong, that it was the site of one of the worst battles of the first Indochina War in 54. So, I mean, it's just an interesting thing. This is such an important artery. This is such crazy, not an easy place to get through unscathed, clearly. That I would imagine that anybody who knows their stuff about Vietnam knows about this area. I guess I'm not the wrong age. I just feel like I'm having to supplement all my education as an adult and pick up good books. So how long did it take you? I cannot remember when you told us you started to write this. And I know you were using dictation software because you don't type fast. So how long do you think this took you? I don't remember when you started.
It took me about 5 years and 3 or 4 copies.
Sounds about right.
I went into high school. After I got out of high school, I went right in the military.
Yep.
That took me to Fort Campbell, the 101st Airborne. Then they sent me to Fort Eustis for map reading.
Where's that?
Fort Eustis is in Virginia.
Okay.
And map reading was they gave us charts that actually, you could be 3/4 of the way around the world. And the charts actually showed every hillside and valley and stream. So you had to read that to be able to call out where you were.
That makes sense.
That took 6 weeks. Then we took amphib training in Virginia, down to Virginia Beach, which took quite a bit of time. And that was good duty. That was right on Virginia Beach.
Yeah, that's not hardship to be on that beach.
Only making $5 a day makes it pretty hard to do anything.
Yeah. Even what year was this?
70.
70?
That was not good pay.
No. So when did you actually ship out then to Vietnam?
August 15th.
Of 70.
70.
And then you were there a year?
Yep.
Is that exact? Is that how?
Well, it was a year and a couple of days.
Yeah. And then
because they would hold you trying to get you to re-enlist.
I can't imagine there was a heck of a lot of re-enlistment going on.
No, there wasn't. Guys were going AWOL from R&R and not coming back.
Oh yeah, you were telling me who was the guy that went to Australia and never came back?
His name was Terry Johnson.
Yeah.
School with him.
And he eventually had to come back, I imagine.
Yeah, he's been in trouble ever since.
Yeah.
If you get in trouble with the military, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I can understand,
Australians are very friendly. They are very, very nice people.
There's just so many things that I thought were fascinating that I learned. And I think too, the camaraderie that you had with all your fellow, soldiers and, the friendships and really then, the balance that you talked about, like with some of the antics and things that you guys got up to, it balanced out the story in terms of people who've never been in a wartime situation. Reading this, I thought it was really a great way to write it, where you had a lot of humor in the story. I'm still kind of just in awe of and like just surprised by the SOS, the search out and steal missions. So when you went to like the supply mission,
Air Force Base,
and you had
Navy supply base.
the first time you were told to do this, like, were you surprised or?
No, you could tell that's what was going on.
Okay.
It was like the guy, we found out most of the trucks on our base all had the same serial numbers. They did that because that way they couldn't tell how many of them were ours and how many of them were somebody else's. So it'd say 573rd, truck number 201, and we'd have 5 trucks with the same serial number.
That seems smart if you're going to,
Yeah, that worked.
this was sanctioned, by your superior, officers, and they gave you kind of a list of the things that were needed.
Not the officers, just the sergeants.
Just the sergeants. Okay.
A lot of lieutenants and that were just straight out of college, and you were better off not to talk to them.
I see.
They
So,
didn't know anything.
and these are the guys that you were with more, knew you better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought,
Need to know to get things done.
say again.
A need to know to get things done.
Yes, a need to know to
Yeah.
get things done.
Yeah,
But
it's called scrounging.
yes, am I right? So that was Captain, was he a Captain Shorty?
Yeah, that is Stormin Norman
Stormin Norman?
Schwarzkopf.
Okay.
But Schwarzkopf was only a captain when he was in Vietnam.
Oh,
And he was on like Sunday morning news after Desert Storm. And he started telling a story about going through a B-52 strike in Mang Yang Pass,
which you were in the middle of.
which he was in the middle of.
Yeah.
And he's talking about firebombing and stuff like that. He did that. So I used it.
And you changed his name?
Hmm?
You changed his name?
His name was Schwarzkopf, but I called him, his nickname was Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf. I called him Stormin Norman Shorts. But he was only a captain back then.
So when they called in that strike and used the convoy basically as bait,
Mm-hmm.
were you in that, or was that?
No, I heard about it.
That's, you heard about it. So that's where we talk about like kind of like the narrative nonfiction, style of things, is where you, right, the stories are all real, but you're piecing things together from different people's accounts and stuff, which totally worked. Clearly, I don't know a lot about this, but that seemed crazy to me that they're going to be like, we're just going to use this convoy as bait, and we're just going to bomb the heck out of the hillsides on either side. I mean, are they that accurate? The bombing rate? I mean, can they be?
They're pretty close.
Okay. Because,
It's the firestorm you have to look out for.
yeah.
Because they used to bomb outside our perimeter too.
Yeah.
And you could see it coming.
Yeah.
The firestorm would start going from east to west, and it just kept coming. We had B-52 strikes about once a month.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sure there were times, typically though, was that something that you guys called in, or like, would they call in more of the strikes from like the helicopters and?
No, the big brass would call it.
Well, they would call it in.
If there was a lot of going on outside our perimeter and they had a lot of knowledge about what was coming and going, they would call in strikes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because we were in Pleiku and they wanted Pleiku. They wanted our airfield.
Right.
They wanted
The North Vietnamese wanted the
we had
airfield.
a North Vietnamese prison camp. They wanted that to be turned back to them, so they tried blowing up the fence.
Right.
And
So-
we had 2 corps. They wanted 2 corps.
How close were you to Pleiku? How close was your base to Pleiku?
About 5 miles.
Okay. Yeah, I was
We
trying to
were
get a
at the end
picture
of
on
the
the map.
snake of plant of companies. We were up against Latrang Valley.
Right. Okay. The story about the shooting up the lights as target practice.
They did that.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. That made me laugh. I thought, how are they getting away with this? Like, but eventually they didn't actually get away with it completely.
No, because we cleared out.
Yeah.
So we actually made, our company and other companies were actually making single shot 50 caliber rifles.
Okay.
With the huge barrels. Guys would mail home and get scopes so they could have a scope. 50 caliber didn't have any way to aim it.
Okay, so the scope was a necessity.
They aimed
Okay,
it by shooting tracers, and that wouldn't work
Okay.
that good. But when they came up with the 50 caliber single shot, it was very accurate.
so am I right in understanding it said 10,000 yards?
Approximately, yeah.
That's more than 5 miles, right? And is my math right? Yeah,
It wasn't that accurate, but they could fire out that far.
2 miles,
Yeah.
10,000 yards,
Mhm.
30,000 feet, right?
Yep. And they had tracers that could
I
follow.
mean, this is really long ways. So the tracer fire, the tracers would help you
Yep.
aim. How close would, like, for accuracy? I mean, if with the
At
scope,
that range, not
no,
that far.
but like you could be accurate, like at, what, half the distance?
Yeah, you could be accurate at 500 yards for sure.
Gotcha.
And then they had tracers that would come in.
So I was curious, the thing I also did not know is that there were Korean mercenaries
Yep. a lot
that
of-
were there. Okay, you didn't know that either. Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room that knew that,
We had
that-
a lot of Koreans up.
Yeah. which is just fascinating to me, but they came in and they were paid.
They
to
were
do
bridge
that.
guards. They
Okay.
guarded all our bridges. So when we came by with a convoy, they didn't have to worry about it.
So the US paid them to do that?
The government
The
did.
government did?
They
Okay.
were very handy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like, and I was surprised too, like your unit got down to such a small number of people, like by the time you were
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
Did they ever replenish that unit?
No, that's when we started losing the war.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
And
I haven't-
Marines pulled out, 500 Marines pulled out in 1 week.
And they didn't replenish.
Yeah. And we never could go out on anything after that.
Well, no, because you didn't have enough man.
We didn't have enough power to go back out in the Latrang Valley.
Right, right. So was O'Reilly a real person?
Yeah, he was. Sergeant O'Reilly was Irish. He went from the Irish Army to the English Army. From the English Army, he went into the American Army. And from there, he got into the CIA.
That also baffles me.
Did he have an accent? Did you tell he was different?
A little bit, not much. He was very much a conniver. He made me an E4 just so I could run around and do stuff for him. I went from an E1 to an E4 in 1 day. He did that for me. He liked the way a farm boy could operate. He'd say, go get that. Don't talk to anybody. And don't tell anybody you know me.
What does E stand for? Like E1?
Oh, that's a rank.
Enlisted.
E7, E8, E9.
Enlisted? Is that the enlisted? Okay. Well, farm boys are known to get stuff done.
Uh-huh.
So
He told me to climb this pole and disconnect a 3-phase air conditioner. And when I was up there doing that, he said, watch out, those are live wires. I'm doing everything for the first time and he's down there watching me. He knows if I get fried, he's gonna just disown me.
So I'm still kind of back on this O'Reilly guy though. I mean, like he was a Irish citizen, started in the Irish Army, went to the UK, was in the great
Mhm.
British Army,
Yeah,
ended up becoming a US serviceman via
Yep.
Germany,
and then,
and eventually in the CIA.
yep, and he spent 5 years in Vietnam. He had
Wow.
orders, he had 5 years in Vietnam. He had orders to go back to the States to train people. And he said, I'm going back to Germany. I'm not going. His life ambition was to retire in Sydney, Australia.
Did he do it? Do you know?
I never saw him.
Never kept
after
up
that.
with him?
Never kept up with people. I've never seen any of these people after I got out of the service. I'd like to find out how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be really something.
Yeah.
See, and you dedicated the book to Billy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
never saw him again. He
Yeah.
he
I
was
mean-
on base for 5 years when I met him.
Well, he grew up there. He grew up on base.
Mhm.
So if anybody, this is Billy in the beginning of the book. So
Billy was brought on as a refugee. His legs were all cut up. And they said he hadn't eaten in a couple of days. And they brought him in because they probably bombed his village.
yeah. Well, and I think at some point in here, I think you'd said that the village, that there was nobody left in the village.
No.
And they just brought him. I mean, what else to do? Bring him
Yeah,
in.
They had
Yeah.
to do something with him.
I mean, that is the compassionate thing. He was too little to fend for himself.
Mhm.
So I had forgotten, I had marked this passage. This is apparently what Norman Schwartz, AKA real name Schwarzkopf, apparently said. So Norman Schwartz told me you men were a bunch of undisciplined, trigger happy, loose cannons, and a bunch of kleptomaniacs. He called you a very well organized group of horse thieves and cattle rustlers, but you couldn't steal horses or cattle for the simple reason there were none to be found. And I see what he means. Half the trucks in our motor pool belong to the Navy and the Air Force.
That'd be about right.
I'm sorry, that just made me laugh. I was like,
See, everybody was going home, so there was all these unwanted vehicles laying around. The Air Force went down to half its men.
right.
And we were still running full convoys. So we'd just go,
Well, and you needed the trucks.
we needed stuff to do,
Yeah.
and we didn't bother with requisitioning.
Well, paperwork takes a while. Well, in some cases. So the other thing that I thought was interesting was just how easily certain pieces of paper from one's file can just disappear
Mhm.
if they were things you just didn't want in your file, right?
That's your 201.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s and 70s, you carried it with you.
So it's basically your entire military,
Everything
like
you had
personal
was in a
file.
manila folder, and you could open it up and read what you wanted. And the Schaefer would actually walk up to you and ask if you wanted a couple pay raises.
And just like put it
and
in.
Write you up the paperwork for being a sergeant, E5, E6. He made himself a lieutenant,
So,
and he wrote himself up to have, he wrote a lot of us up to have 20% disability and back pains so we could collect.
disability.
He just filled in the paper.
Okay, so we're in the computer age now, and clearly that would never happen now. Like probably couldn't happen now just because we rely on computer records.
Mhm.
No, did somebody just say, wait, I heard something from the gallery here. I mean, you have this idea.
Never happens.
Oh, never. Okay. Ha 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 ha.
You could only make it faster.
Only make it faster.
Mhm.
So I found this to be so interesting because you make assumptions about the military that, it's going to just run a certain way. And from my inexperienced, view of things, I was just surprised that I was it kind of made me happy, kind of gleeful that there was somebody willing to go, whatever. What do you want? You want to be an E6? Great. We're just going to
Mhm. Well, he got paid. He came away pretty good.
oh, so there was a little
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you'd take your whole paycheck if you did.
I see. So there was you had to be agreeable to the process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
And he would also, if you had Article 15s that the captain was going to give you, he would get rid of those for you too.
Well, I think that was an important person to know.
Mhm.
So I'm reading this book, and clearly there's all the horrific things of war in it. You're battling, you're getting, there's sniper fire coming down on you. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going down. And then you write something about the fact that and I don't know if this was you guys or this was other stories told to you, that when you would take a bathroom break off the back of the truck, you would do your best to try to hit the windshield of the truck behind you.
No, that was when the shore patrol was trying to catch us.
Oh, perfect. Even better. Even better. I mean, accuracy counts. That's,
Was that a 50 caliber?
Well, we had a 106. We spun it around and put flashlights down the battery, and the flashlights would blind the driver.
Oh.
The
That
shore
sounds
patrol gave up on us. We were kicked out of Da Nang once.
You got kicked out of Da Nang?
Yeah,
Do tell.
that's why we went to Long Binh and Quin Yan.
So what'd you do to get kicked out of Da Nang? Will you tell us?
We were doing stuff.
Okay. So in this story of the aerial bombardment, where the convoy was used as, the bait, there was like the Cessna that was coming along with them.
Push-pull Cessna.
Yeah. And so they were videotaping it, I
Yeah,
guess.
and photographing.
Did you ever see that?
Yeah, there were push-pull Cessnas right in Madison.
Okay.
Air Force had a lot of them.
So did you ever see any of the video? I mean, I can't imagine.
No, we just knew they were dropping down and we could see them taking pictures.
Okay.
When they'd come over at treetop level and photograph us.
Yeah. Interesting. I can imagine that you weren't always real happy with that sort of.
No, because
Yeah.
we knew they were the ones that organized the airstrike.
That's right. That's right. Do we have other questions? I'm monopolizing. I don't have to monopolize. I have more questions. Okay. Oh, yes. Good question. The question for everyone
That's where you
online.
get knocked down a couple ranks and you lose a month's pay.
Article 15. What do you have to do to get an Article 15? What might one do hypothetically to get an Article 15?
Well, you stay home for a month without asking.
I mean, like home, like here
Yeah.
on leave.
Yeah, there was a guy right outside of town here did that.
And then how does that conversation go when it's time to go back? Like, do you just show back up on base and go, I guess I'm ready now? I mean, like,
Yeah. That or the cops come to the door and they
Oh.
found you.
yeah,
But an
Yeah.
Article 15 could be sleeping on guard duty.
okay,
It could be punching somebody out. Getting out of the line would get you an Article 15.
okay. So just general
Yeah,
misbehaving.
yeah. If you had a couple of them, you might get put in LBJ jail.
How often did you get to come back to the States?
Huh?
How often did you get to come back to the States?
Never.
Never. Okay.
We had
so
two
home was-
leaves. I had one to Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
Then we had an R&R to Quinyon Beach, Red Beach. Australia is beautiful. Those people really liked us over there.
So
By boat or by plane?
Hmm?
How'd you get there? By boat or by plane?
Well, they flew us down there. Went to the King's Cross area, which is kind of like San Francisco. And they just took us right in. They told us, you can't stay in a hotel. You got to come stay in our apartment. That was really friendly of them. They took us down and showed us Whiskey a Go-Go. They took us to the Broadway play Hair.
oh, that had to be interesting. Yeah.
I kept my clothes on when they danced.
Did other people not?
At the end of the Broadway play Hair, they come out and they start singing and dancing, and everybody from the audience comes up onto the stage.
Naked?
Yep.
That is not the same Broadway show I saw.
This is Sydney, Australia, and they're very liberal there. Because I was with a lady from New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
She was 19 too.
I'm learning. I'm learning a lot. This is very educational.
I'll
So
tell you more about that.
so you okay. So you wouldn't have gotten like to go home on leave unless you maybe were re-upping, and then would you get a break
Uh-huh.
between the
Or
year?
if you had a family
Emer-
death or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. That makes sense.
But you weren't allowed to re-enlist. You had to re-enlist for 2 years just to get out of there.
Oh,
So if you didn't like what you saw, you had to re-enlist to go to Germany or something like that.
I see.
And they didn't offer that till the end.
Right. So otherwise, were people re-enlisting and then
Couple guys did.
like to stay? Like
No,
in
a couple
Vietnam?
guys
Okay.
looked at what was going on and they ran into the captain's office and re-enlisted. And I think they got on the same plane they came in on.
So that then they were in for 2 years, but then they got to be in Germany instead of on the front lines.
Yeah. They looked at us and said, we don't want to be here.
Go ahead.
Jim, can you talk about how you found out you had to go?
Hmm?
Oh,
Can you talk about back in the day when you found out that you had to go to Vietnam? I mean, it was the draft, which most people, a lot of people don't even see.
yeah. So the question is about the notification, the draft notification that came to Jim.
Oh, well, they told us we were going as soon as we got into basic training. We were still in our civilian clothes. And they told us, listen up, you're going. You've already got your paperwork on the desk. They trained us with M14s. They gave me training in map reading and bringing in artillery. And then they gave me training in amphibious training, which I never used. That's the military. They don't train you for anything. And then they said, well, I started out with training with an M14 with a rifle, and that put me into being a sniper. Because an M14 was only used, they were going to the M16, but it wasn't working out the way they wanted to. The bullets would do a flip-flop after 100 yards.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work.
But the M14 was accurate out to a couple hundred yards.
And Jim, you said you were 19
Oh, yeah,
and most of the guys with you, were they the same age?
pretty much, except Gary Schaefer got nabbed after he got out of college and got sent in by the draft. Guys that got sent in after the draft were pretty mad about it. 'Cause
Okay.
one guy was in our basic training group, had a bachelor's degree. He got orders for Vietnam. He was not happy about that. They sent him in as 11 Bravo.
So you were not drafted, you volunteered?
No, I was drafted,
You were
but I
drafted.
volunteered to go.
Oh.
Because I could have gone into the reserves, but I said, I'm going.
What made you decide?
Hmm?
What made you decide that? Say, I'm going.
The American Legion post in Columbus is named after my uncle. My father was in artillery.
Yep.
My mother's brother was a pilot in the Philippines. He got shot down, never came back. We had another uncle who was in the Marines in the Philippines. So I just felt like being a veteran. I got a lot of benefits nowadays. I don't have any health care except for the VA hospital.
Jim, I really enjoyed your book. Thank you for following through and writing it. I can't imagine.
Well, it just stuck with me. During the day when I'm working, I'll actually be thinking about this stuff. And I work with veterans. So I'd be sitting talking with this guy, and all at once he'd start telling me his story.
Well,
And one guy started telling me this story about going into Burma. And how'd you do that?
I want to know about that.
Don't we all? Isn't that was
He
the crazy
He
story?
lived right outside town here. He was a truck driver. He had brain cancer. This is 15 years ago. But I had veterans plates on my van, and I'm talking to him, and I'm giving him some free time because I realize he's a veteran. He's getting sick. He said, "Yeah, I was in your area. I was up in Pleiku, and from Pleiku we organized unit to go into Burma, through Thailand, up into Burma, onto the Burma Road, onto these little city of Wanling, which is on the Chinese border, and they filmed and photographed the Chinese New Year's 3 years in a row. And they never had it come out. Well, they're overhanging a cliff, and they had all kinds of places they could film from. But he actually did that.
So I wanted to understand something better. So LBJ, so this was like a punishment?
Yes,
So-
Long Bend Prison,
Long Band prison. So that's
jail,
Jail.
Long Bend Jail.
yeah, okay. So basically you'd be sent out on like some mission like that, or like what? So but there was a discussion that this trip was a punishment for the people that went,
Yeah,
that accompanied it.
well, it was better than going there.
Oh, I see. That was the choice. End up in the prison or say,
Mhm.
yeah, sure, I'll go,
Because most of these guys are in trouble for stuff they did around us.
right.
The
Okay.
captain wanted to get rid of them.
Why are they filming that?
Where were they filming the New Year's celebration?
Chinese New Year's parades are military. They'd
Oh,
have the Red Guard. They would show their missiles. They'd show their tanks. He said they showed these satellite dishes that they'd never seen before, and they photographed those so they knew what kind of satellite dishes they were. And then they'd record their speeches so they knew what kind of speeches they were. And these speeches
that
would be
makes
all be
sense.
made by military people
yeah.
talking about what they wanted to do next. The CIA wanted to be in Vietnam just to be up against China. That was their main objective because they went into Laos,
Mhm.
they went into Thailand, they went up into Burma. The CIA only wanted to be up next to China.
The part of the story where they're looking through their telescope or whatever, and then they realize the Chinese are looking straight back at them with the binoculars.
Yeah.
And then that was it the same unit that they came in contact with later, or was it a different unit?
No,
do you
they were
think?
different units.
Different units.
They had to go through the the mountains and
Mhm.
the valleys where these apes and gorillas were living.
Yeah, so that was also like just like the juxtaposition of that kind of mission and then coming back and then being in like direct combat. I mean, there was no like exchange of gunfire or anything. They were just on a recon mission, right? Like just to like get information.
The Chinese were friendly.
Yeah. And
they didn't realize what they were all doing.
Okay. I just was surprised. So they are talking, the people on this mission are talking to the one guy from China, an officer was his mom living in San Francisco, and
his sister was living in San Francisco.
Yeah. And then like he just finished school in the US and now he's back in the Chinese military. And I mean, it just was such a weird like intersection of the world that they're like, hey, yeah, like, I went to school, with all these American kids and now I'm over here. And
Well, Chinese wanted to know more about America. So they were sending their smartest people over. Madison's full of Chinese.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure. I just thought it just seemed so weird to like meet up with somebody who was so friendly and was like, send a postcard to my sister when you get back from me, yeah. And then the other things too, like not to be talking about like you already talked about the snake meat. We talked about like the dog meat, but like the monkey meat. And then just like how surreal it would be to have like, apes hanging around and it's like, like nature land kind of thing. And then the baby elephants. And I mean, you paint a very vivid picture of things. And I was just fascinated by that section in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Burmese people were quite primitive too.
It was at page 161. There was something about how the elephants were.
Well, they're curious.
Yeah, so they seemed to like McNulty and Shotgun Eddie. The baby elephants were growing through their pockets and tried to sit in their laps like puppies seeking companionship. They couldn't get close enough. It was one thing to have a dog licking you. It was another thing to have an elephant sneeze in your face.
There were elephants all the way through Asia. Vietnam had elephants. They're smaller than our elephants.
Sure.
They're smaller than African elephants, but they had elephants for hauling logs out of the forest, and they'd use elephants for going through brush.
Yeah, that would make sense.
There were no horses. They had elephants and water buffalo.
Sure, that makes sense. But here's that part about the Chinese officers talking. My father was an officer in the Chinese army. For years, he served his country. I'm going into government law in hopes of becoming an ambassador to your country. My background in schooling brings me here to you, and hopefully we have a happy meeting. Today, my sister and two cousins are attending college in the States. One is going to Stanford and loves football games. When she returns, she will run a section of our government. One is going to Harvard and may not want to come home as she wants a double citizenship. My younger cousin is a party animal at the University of Wisconsin. I'm like,
Madison got dozens of Chinese people.
Yeah, no, very much so.
Beginning of the year when they're walking around, they'll ask you, "Where's this? Where's that?"
Okay, so how did you decide what exactly to put in the story? Did you have more that you didn't put in?
Yeah, there's a second book coming out about Billy coming out and how Vietnam falls.
Okay.
But I was easy on the Chinese because they make movies too.
They do. Yeah. They make a lot of movies.
Yeah, they might make mine.
They might. No, and I think we were talking a little bit about different producers and stuff, and I don't live in that world where I know, a lot of people make books into movies, but this is very cinematic and I could see it being a very, very good movie. So,
that's why I put so much into it as far as being an action movie.
Yeah, no, I love that.
I left out a lot of the blood and guts stuff. I didn't want to put that in there.
Well, and I mean, we get it. We get it. I mean, you've got the scenes in there, and obviously there are people not going to be making it home alive. And we see that. And I think that's a really hard line to balance, right? It's really a hard thing to balance when you're writing about war, and then trying to make it palatable. But war isn't really palatable, right? I mean, it's not.
Yeah. When Amatuzio gets shot in the truck, Amatuzio was a real person. We put him on a helicopter. They took him to the Pleiku airfield, to the Pleiku hospital. We went up to the hospital, see him, and they said he's not here. They put him on a Navy ship, and we never saw him again. If in Vietnam, if you died on a Navy ship offshore, you weren't included in the casualties. So you could have hundreds of people die and their names would not be on the casualty list
That doesn't
for
make any
dying in Vietnam.
sense.
That's how they did it. They kept the numbers down. Huh?
So you're just MIA?
No, you're dead, but you're dead at sea.
Oh, so were these hospital ships?
Now there'd be hospital ships.
So but even so, it didn't matter that the injuries were
Yeah,
occurring on land.
yeah, the military wanted to keep the death count down, so they'd put them on a Navy ship, Red Cross ship, and if they died out at sea, your numbers didn't show up as casualties and none.
Well, that's an educational thing I did not know.
I don't know. I know, and that we
Oh, that's
did
a good
not
question.
see Amatuzio again.
Yeah. One of the questions was whether it affected like whatever the pay would have been if depending upon where you were declared dead versus wow. Well, that's crazy. That's crazy.
That's our government.
Yeah. I mean, like I should be surprised, but
What
yeah.
are they doing in Burma?
Yeah. Good point. Good
Yeah.
point.
And it never came up.
Can you hear us out here in Zoom land?
Yes. Yes.
I just had a quick question for Jim on the writing process. And first of all, Jim, thank you for your service, and the same for all the VFW and American Legion guys there and
We can
women.
view from here. So
Anyway, I wondered how you go about your writing. Is it a daily thing? Do you start at the same time every day and work for, say, 2 or 3 hours? I know there's so much discipline involved in writing fiction, especially if you don't have a deadline or a contract or something like that. How did you go about it, disciplining yourself to write this book?
great question.
I take notes on what I'm reading or other people are telling me, and then I write in the winter.
In
When
the
there's
winter.
I write on when there's a foot of snow on the ground.
It's a good time to write in Wisconsin when there's a foot of snow on the
It's
ground.
cold and dark, and having a laptop with words with Dragon Speak really helps.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing. So you dictated it. Was Dragon Speak the only program that you used? Did you ever try any others?
Yeah, my daughter has to help me with that every other day.
Dragon Speak.
Angie gets me into it.
Like a tape recorder.
Oh, okay. So sometimes a tape recorder.
Dictate that to and then we would go through everything like flourish and all.
Got it.
Sometimes the Dragon Speak doesn't get everything that you're saying.
Right.
Punctuation.
Right. It's run on sentences. So his daughter, Angie, is here and for everyone on Zoom, and she's explaining how she would assist with the dictation and getting everything properly formatted. Well, at least sentence structure.
One and then see step two.
Well, and I think that's really interesting too. I mean, to have that technology was really important, right? Like,
That was the only way to go.
Yeah.
I'd be on the first page if it wasn't for that.
yeah. Well,
Just one. I can't read.
I will be forever grateful for the typing teacher at Fall River High School, right? So
I got kicked out of typing.
You got kicked out of typing?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, they didn't even have electric typewriters back then. They had those little hand ones. All that modern stuff hadn't come along. She said I was too loud.
You typed too loudly?
Well, I don't think it was typing.
Oh. Oh, there are all kinds of rules in school. I think it was one of your buddies got married near the end, near the point where they
Yeah, steamer.
Yeah.
He married a Vietnamese lady, and they were going to bring her back as a war bride. I don't know if that happened or not.
Yeah, you never know.
When you went into Vietnam government building, you had to have a pocket full of money and pay them off.
Okay.
And if you didn't get everything you wanted that day, you had to start again and pay them off the next day. They were totally into that idea that everything had to be bought.
Yeah. And that was like the Vietnamese government
Well, the Mexicans down
yeah.
in Tijuana are that way too.
Would you ever go back to visit Vietnam?
I've heard you can't go inland. You can only be on the resort beaches. And that wouldn't do me any good.
No, because you'd want to see where
I'd
you,
have to go inland quite a ways. I'd have to go inland to the other side of the country.
right.
But they don't
Right.
want you going inland. They want to keep you on the beach where it's all Americanized.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you could though, would you? If you could go see where you served, would you be
You
in?
try, yeah.
Pay somebody off.
Pay somebody off?
I'm just a carpenter. I don't have that much money.
So part of your supplies, you mentioned there's always alcohol. And you always have to bring your own beer. So where did all of the beer and alcohol come from?
Great
Air Force.
question. The Air Force?
Supply
So you
base.
requisitioned it or you bought it locally?
If you could get into a PX that had anything, more than likely when you got to the PX, everything was gone.
Okay.
You couldn't find cigarettes, you couldn't find booze. Some people had turntables so they could listen to records. That stuff would all be gone.
I want the consumables. I don't need a turntable.
You want the beer and the alcohol?
Well, at night,
That's what
that's
you're
what you do, is sit around and listen to records. If
That
you
makes
had
sense.
the
Yeah,
ability
you had a
to do it.
turntable.
But did you have a lot? I mean, you said there's always alcohol. Or really, there wasn't. You were just bringing it to the captains or you were just bringing it.
Oh, we had a way of getting it.
Are you going to tell us?
Yeah, we stole it.
Well, on your
The Navy-
on your supply
The
mission.
Navy had
SOS?
too much good stuff.
And why was the Navy so well supplied?
It was longshoremen who had their ships right along the coast,
Oh yeah, okay, that was a dumb
Also-
question.
and we'd find out where everything was.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
O'Reilly was a real person. He ran around doing that.
Well, good Irishman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Doc Murphy
Yeah, also a wonderful character, but a real person.
that
Doc
lives in
Murphy.
DeForest.
Really? Yeah. So did you ever see him?
Yeah, I saw him last week,
All right.
Veterans Day.
There you go.
He didn't do all the stuff I said, but I made him look good.
Did he appreciate that? Has he read the book?
He's actually in charge of Chapter 5 Vietnam vets.
Okay.
That's a special unit of guys.
Okay.
You had to be a Vietnam vet to be in Chapter 5.
Okay. So he's read it.
Yeah,
He's got a copy.
he's a real person.
All right. Do you have a question?
Well, I couldn't remember. You have to be 21 to get hard liquor, buy hard liquor.
I didn't hear you.
Did you have to be 21 to buy hard liquor?
Did you have to be 21 to buy
No,
hard
you
liquor?
didn't. All you had to do was have a ration card.
You didn't buy it.
You didn't. Yeah, there you,
No, you didn't have to. They didn't check you.
I have a feeling they really shouldn't check, given what you're doing, like that you should be allowed to drink. But was it even 21 back then? It wasn't. It would have been 18. Right. Of course. Of course.
I think it was just 18 for beer.
Just 18 for beer. Hard liquor was still 21. So not here, not good old Wisconsin.
No, we had NCO offices and you can go in and get anything you want. You could go up to the NCO office.
For hard liquor. Yeah.
Not there, you didn't.
No, not in the service. They're in the service.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and then it must have shifted back because then I was on the cusp. I kept missing it by a year.
You just needed a friend.
Yeah, I had some.
You just needed an older friend. Is all you need.
Go ahead, Julia.
One of the favorite sayings. There's people who were, you're old enough for the draft, but not the draft beer.
Yeah, so old enough for the draft, but not the draft beer.
So
That doesn't seem right.
that's why the age came down to 18.
Gotcha.
Because of that.
Ah,
Moore made a strong argument that people should have more privileges when they're 18.
Mhm.
yeah, if you could go off and fight in a war, you should be able to order what you want to drink at the bar.
Those things came along some years later.
Yes.
Right.
No,
Okay, that makes
'cause I
sense.
couldn't vote when I came home even.
Right.
Then Nixon came along.
One of the human interest stories about Jim and Jim's sister-in-law is that his mother, who I knew very, very well, used to say the rosary every single day. She would eat lunch and go upstairs and she would kneel by the bed and say the rosary that her son came home safe. There were 4 boys and Jim was the only one that went to Vietnam. The other 3 were in reserve. And she was just so afraid that something would happen to her.
So
I think that's just part of the human interest of what people are going through at that time.
oh, I think that, I mean, it just shows, I don't know how any member of the family isn't worried, and a mom in particular. So if you weren't hearing that online, she was talking about that your mom every day would, after lunch, go upstairs and say the rosary every day until you came home.
Yeah, well, she knew I needed more help than that.
She was probably praying the devotion when you were in high school.
Okay, so we're getting more comments that she was probably praying the rosary while he was in high school too. So, so you take that sweet story, and now we're just,
Well, we were a bunch of hellions.
Go ahead.
Guys that kind of went wild, that's going, out the land.
Oh, that's a good question. So in the book, some of, for the people online, in the book, there was a discussion of some of the people who, you know, kind of went, I don't know, like native in a way, and they just went and they went AWOL and started to live out on the land. Do you know what happened to any of them?
Well,
or-
usually they'd get sick and they would get tired of living up in the mountains too.
Yeah,
But they'd get tired of taking orders.
yeah.
And if you got on the wrong side of a captain or a first sergeant, you were
You got all,
you were in trouble.
and you got all the junk jobs then, probably.
Yeah, he would look you up to getting you in trouble. And
So then they just said, forget it, and they'd like take off and go live
but
wherever.
I was in good terms with the first sergeant. He liked me.
So for the people, the guys who did that, though, I mean, if you come in contact with any, you know, North Vietnamese, well, what the heck? I mean, they're gonna probably kill you, right? I mean, like if you're alone out, like living rough, right? I mean, it couldn't have been a very safe thing to do.
Well, usually you'd come down with something, malaria, or,
Yeah.
giardia, because they drank raw water.
Yeah, that's
Wasn't-
not a good thing.
And you'd had to have your malaria pills,
Which
and
you would then not have a supply of
You'd have to
anymore,
have-
right?
because I had giardia, kidney infections, even though I had all the stuff.
Yeah.
They took me out of the field. That's where I met Sergeant O'Reilly.
Okay.
And it was only after about 5 months they put me back into the field.
Do you never had malaria? Never.
No, I
caught
never had malaria. Malaria
Yeah.
is kind of like something you have to build up to, and I guess it's real hard to get rid of.
Yeah. I know people who live in other countries who they don't take malaria pills because it would be, if you live there, you don't. And then they just expect to get it like once a year and then hope they don't get worse.
Never ever had it.
Yeah. Oh, it's gotten louder there. Go ahead, Heather.
So how did you remember some of these stories so well? Like some of the details, did you keep journals or notes or?
And I kept notes, yeah. And there was a magazine called the Vietnam Vets that Woodman's used to sell. I haven't seen it lately, but that had actually articles in it about guys out on point, how to bring in artillery, which was different than what I knew about. Nowadays, they bring in artillery with lasers. Back in Vietnam, we'd count 10 steps and tie a knot in a shoestring, take another 10 steps and tie knots in a shoestring.
Is that a click?
Those are clicks.
That's a click. I never knew what a
And then
click
you'd
was.
bring in one round or smoke to find out how you were doing.
Interesting.
You couldn't talk to the guy counting.
I can imagine that. That's like that mean thing people do when you're trying to like make, do.
Well, a couple
like-
guys that do the counting and that, but
Yeah.
pretty old fashioned. We had radios left over from World War II. We had C rations that were older than you were.
Yeah. So that I actually read that part to my husband. I said, "Oh, you got to listen to this." But the fact that there was a funny part. It was like the older the C ration, the faster it ran through you.
Mhm.
I think you put, which kind of makes sense. But I mean, technically, I guess it was still okay to eat it. I mean, like, I mean, I'm just amazed that
Mhm.
you were stuck with that.
For
So,
beer, we had Blatz. The beer came in solid steel cans and they'd be all rusty. I mean, you had to clean off the top and hope it didn't blow up on you when you opened it up.
you
That
were,
stuff sat out for months before they brought it off the shore. So guys that drink hard stuff.
oh, oof. But your tetanus shots were up to date.
Well, I lost a third of my body weight.
So when you came home, you were 1/3 down.
I weighed what I weighed in 8th grade.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That's crazy.
I knew that because I gave my younger brother a pair of dress pants that I wore for 8th grade graduation, and they fit me till I was 23.
Wow. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute, right? So have you started your second book?
Working on
Is Angie ready for book 2?
I've gotta get prepared.
Is Christine ready for book 2?
it. In book 2, Pleiku falls to the North Vietnamese.
Well, it looks to me like you have an audience for book 2 by the number of people who have turned out here tonight.
What's the time span from the beginning of the book to the end of the book? Like, is it weeks, months, a year?
Before I die.
No, I mean, this
Oh.
this specific book.
How many?
January 70 and
Took about 5 years of winters.
Oh yeah, but she's saying like, was it 6 months of your deployment? Does this cover the whole year?
No, it goes
say it's fiction.
It goes back and forth to the 60s. In 65, the North Vietnamese were up in the highlands. And
So it's a compilation of
all
different
kinds of
stories.
stories.
Okay, gotcha.
Rolling Thunder was actually an Air Force assault, and that happened in 68, but I used it.
Right. So it's not linear. I didn't know that though either. That's a very good question. You know, the other thing too is it's written like in first person, but we don't really, it's not, we like, it's your voice, but is it ever identified? No.
He didn't write it initially.
Oh, did you shift it?
Yeah, because I just thought it would be a better book.
Yeah, no, but it works. And I kept thinking that someone was going to shout at you, the character, and then we would know like the name, your name, but it's never really in here, is it? Which I thought was kind of brilliant in a way, because then it can be like everybody's book. Well, it was fascinating, and we'd been waiting, and we knew you would get there. Yes, please.
About what you were just mentioning about that. So not really. I noticed that pretty quickly, and I liked it because I felt like he was off speed.
Yes, narrating it. Yeah, almost omniscient in a way, like looking down at everything. Yeah, right.
Makes for an easy read.
Yes. Yeah, it works. So we're discussing the fact that it's written from the first person perspective, but there's times when it is, almost a little omniscient, like where, you're narrating everything you're seeing. So really it's not omniscient, but it worked. But you're right. You do notice it right away. Yeah. So excellent. Do we have any more questions? Heather?
I know probably everybody writes these questions, but what were your events and what were events here that you experienced personally? Like, which ones were yours and which ones were?
Well, I ran this gun truck. I ran on that gun truck for 6 months. After you got on that gun truck, you didn't want to do anything else. That was the most exciting thing you could ever do.
And that was on the pass. If you were on the pass,
I was on Mang Yang Pass. Yeah.
Yep.
We went up and down it.
Multiple, how many times do you think?
I don't even remember anymore. And then we'd go to other fire bases. We'd deliver out to them. The Koreans would have the bridges guarded so we could go over those at full speed. But after you got on a gun truck, you didn't want to go out in the field anymore.
I can imagine that would be far less appealing to anyone on foot. So
If you had to earn a place on the gun truck, somebody had to go home. And being a scrounge, I knew how to get stuff. They liked that idea. Because we had to scrounge parts for our trucks. Just to keep them going, because we were so far from the ocean, we had a big problem getting enough parts up there.
imagine.
And we were running out of people too. We went way down in people. Half our compound was empty when I left. And then we circled up and we went inside. We had a perimeter inside a perimeter.
Makes sense.
And those guys were, I don't know how much longer they lasted up there. But the North Vietnamese wanted to play cool because we had the airfield. It was 2 Corps. And that was the central command post for South Vietnam. Special forces were in there. CIA was in there. We had the tank farm, so they could get all this gas. I guess that got burnt up before they got in there.
It was strategic, tactical.
Well,
They have it.
when America cut off its aid,
Yeah.
South Vietnamese had jets caught on the ground with no fuel.
That's right.
So they didn't have anything they could do with them. They had to retreat. That's when the North Vietnamese came down and took over.
Yep.
I don't know what they did with all the prisoners.
All of the
North
the Vietnamese prisoners that you
VC prison camp,
that
right there. And that was in the book about how they'd punish them.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
They have cages alongside the road, and we'd run our trucks up along the
Kind of
cages.
sideswipe them a little bit.
Yep.
Yep.
Scrape them. We actually did that.
Are there any other? Go ahead.
Yeah, when you book there,
Hmm?
when you just start, how are you treated in the camp?
Everybody had a color TV by then. So they said, we saw that on color TV.
Yeah.
That didn't look that bad to me. You weren't gone that long.
Oh, real nice things to say to somebody. Real
Yeah,
nice.
all my high school buddies were like that. And guys would go in the Marine Corps and they'd work out a deal with the Marines. They wouldn't go to Vietnam, but for 4 years they'd stay stateside. One guy, name was Waddle, went to Hawaii just so he wouldn't have to go to Vietnam. But then they found out when they got out of the service, they didn't get as many benefits as the guys who went to Vietnam. You had to serve overseas to get the VA hospital
Oh,
or do
okay.
something else. But no, nobody asked me about it for years and years and years. Yep. Yep, I tried hitchhiking home and they wouldn't give me a ride.
So you took your uniform off
Yeah.
and threw it away?
Right in Madison.
Nobody give you a ride?
Yeah, of course, the Madison airport's kind of on a dead end road.
But still.
Well, I can remember there was so much dissension over that war at that time. Yeah, I believe there wasn't a plate glass window in the street.
Yeah,
Oh, sure.
yeah,
Because of the riot.
yeah.
Sure. So someone was saying that there wasn't a plate glass window on any of the stores on State Street for 5 years. It was plexiglass, right? Did they replace it with or plywood or whatever? Yeah.
Then they just put those walls and brick them up in places where they used to be.
Oh, okay. So basically just to prevent it from being broken over and over and over again. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Just lost all the windows, just didn't happen.
And the tear gas was pretty bad some days.
Yeah.
Changed quite a bit now.
Tear gas
Now the
they're talking
veterans
about
have quite
too
a bit
during
of
the
benefits
protests.
coming.
Yeah.
Any more questions? No?
I
Right.
just have a comment about, I was able to read the book, I guess about 10 months ago now, probably. And I was telling Jim this the other night on the phone, that some of you are familiar with Google Earth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you can go on Google Earth and you can find Mang Yang Pass.
You can zoom right in on Google Earth on this pass. That's what they're saying is you can zoom right in on this.
Photograph to another map that shows like the roads and highways and stuff that he talks about in the book. I might, you know, so.
So good old Google. If you want to actually see Mang Yang Pass, just zoom in on Google Earth, I guess.
That really happened.
Wow.
We did not control anything but the road.
Just
When
the
we
road.
go up the pass, we'd call for helicopter support.
Mhm.
That's when we put on our flak jackets and steel
Right.
pots. Because that was the only time we controlled things like that. They would spring barbed wire across the road. We try and take off the first Jeep driver's head.
Oh, God.
At night, they'd do that,
Ugh.
or during the day.
Well, I mean, like, we shouldn't be surprised, but God, right?
Well, that's what they do.
Well, I know. Man,
But we were so far up into the mountains, they didn't control anything.
yeah, gotcha.
At night, we would just sit inside of our bunkers and that.
Any more questions? Well, thank you so much for sharing this. Thanks for writing this. And I know that he'd be more than happy to sign books. There's more books here if you'd like to buy them. They're $15. So come on up and Jim will sign books for you. So thank you.